March 24th, 2026, 1:13 a.m. local time. Air raid sirens fire across Kiev, then Lviv, then Dnipro, then Zaporizhzhia, then Ivano-Frankivsk, then Kharkiv, then Poltava. 7 cities simultaneously in the middle of the night. Ukrainian air defense operators stare at radar screens, showing something they have not seen in weeks. Not 80 drones, not 120. Nearly 400 incoming contacts spread across a 100-200 kilometer front, flying at low altitude, navigating around known radar positions, some in waves, some solo, all heading for civilian infrastructure. This is not a strike. This is the opening move of Russia's spring offensive. And the weapon Russia chose to announce it was not tanks, not artillery, not ground troops massing on the front line. It was a drone, specifically the Iranian-designed Shahed, cheap, slow, simple, and now being produced inside Russia at a rate that changes everything about how this war ends. Let me tell you what just happened and why the 400 drone number is not the story. The story is the factory behind it, 404. That is the number of Shahed-type drones Russia is now manufacturing every single day inside its own borders. Not importing. Manufacturing. Under license from Iran, using smuggled Western electronics and Chinese components, Russia has built a domestic drone production infrastructure that outputs more than 400 drones every 24 hours. In the month of February 2026 alone, Russia launched a record 15,000 drones at Ukraine. 15,000 in 1 month. That is 500 per day in usage. Russia is producing 404 per day and has been stockpiling the surplus. The attack on March 24th did not come from current production. It came from a warehouse. And here's the number that explains why the spring offensive begins now. Russia has been saving its stockpile for weeks. Peace talks in Abu Dhabi were scheduled. Russia launched its biggest drone barrage in weeks the day before those talks were set to resume. The message is not tactical. It is negotiating posture delivered in ordnance. And the math behind it makes it sustainable in a way that Ukrainian and Western air defenses simply cannot match indefinitely. That is what I am going to prove to you tonight. Let me explain what the Shahed drone actually is, because the mainstream coverage calls it Iranian-designed and moves on. Understanding the weapon is understanding why 400 in a single night is not a crisis. It is a Tuesday. The Shahed 136, which Russia calls the Garan 2, is a one-way attack drone. It is not guided by a pilot. It is programmed with GPS coordinates and launched. It flies at approximately 115 miles per hour, which is slow by any modern aviation standard. It has a wingspan of roughly 8.5 feet. It carries an explosive warhead of approximately 110 pounds. It costs between $20,000 and $50,000 to produce. The propeller-driven variants, the Garan 1 and Garan 2, fly at low altitude. They hug terrain. They use the Earth's curvature to avoid radar detection. At low altitude, ground-based radar sees them at perhaps 30 to 50 kilometers. At that range, a closing speed of 115 miles per hour gives Ukrainian air defense operators approximately 15 to 20 minutes to respond per drone. When 400 arrive, simultaneously across 7 cities, the math of response time collapses. Every battery is tracking multiple contacts. Every operator is making triage decisions. Which drones get a missile? Which get an interceptor drone? Which do we let through and hope they miss? Russia understands this arithmetic perfectly. The Shahed is not trying to be accurate, it is trying to be numerous. The accuracy of any individual drone is secondary to the compound effect of 400 simultaneous contacts saturating every layer of defense at once. The upgraded variants complicate this further. Russia's jet-powered Garan 3 now flies at 230 to 310 miles per hour, roughly double the speed of the original. Ukrainian interceptor drones were designed to chase 115 mph targets. At 310 mph, the Garan 3 can simply outrun the cheap Defenders. And the newest variants carry onboard cameras and remote piloting capability, meaning a Russian operator can override the pre-programmed route mid-flight and steer around an emerging intercept threat. This is not the same drone Ukraine faced in 2022. It has evolved, and the factory producing it is running 3 shifts a day. Let me walk through the numbers that explain why Russia launched its spring offensive with drones rather than tanks, because it is not a choice driven by capability, it is a choice driven by economics. Russia produces 404 Shahed-type drones per day. At $50,000 per drone on the high end, that is $20.2 million per day in production costs. At $20,000 per drone on the low end, that is $8 million per day. Call it $15 million per day as a midpoint. Ukraine's primary counter to Shahed drones is a layered system. At the expensive end are Patriot interceptors, which cost $1 million to $10 million per shot. Each Patriot missile used to destroy a $50,000 drone represents a cost exchange ratio of 20 to 1 against Ukraine at minimum. and 200 to 1 at maximum. This is why Ukraine has increasingly shifted to cheap interceptor drones, which cost $2,500 to $5,000 to absorb the volume. Ukraine's interceptor drone program is genuinely impressive. As of January 2026, Ukraine was producing 1,500 interceptor drones per day. Its success rate against Shaheds is approaching 90%. Last month, Ukraine shot down 3,238 Shahed-type drones in a single month. That is a record. Those are real numbers representing real defensive capability, and none of it is enough. Here is why. Russia is scaling to 1,000 Shahed drones per day. That is the target confirmed by Ukraine's own Commander-in-Chief, General Syrskyi, in January 2026. At 1,000 per day, Russia can launch 30,000 drones per month. Ukraine's record interception month was 3,238. If Russia deploys at full production capacity, Ukraine's interception capacity covers roughly 1/10 of incoming volume. The remaining 9/10 penetrate. Some miss, some malfunction, many do not. At $50,000 per drone, 30,000 monthly launches costs Russia $1.5 billion per month. The infrastructure damage those drones inflict on power grids, heating systems, water facilities, and civilian housing consistently runs into the billions per month. And Ukraine must replace every interceptor missile it fires, every interceptor drone it deploys, and every piece of civilian infrastructure that is hit. Russia spends $1.5 billion per month attacking. Ukraine spends multiples of that defending and rebuilding. This is the mathematics of attrition warfare, not a battle of firepower, a battle of manufacturing capacity and financial endurance. And Russia, with Chinese components flowing freely and Western sanctions failing to close the supply chain, is winning that calculation. The March 24th attack alone, 400 drones, 23 cruise missiles, 7 ballistic missiles, cost Russia an estimated $25 to $35 million in munitions. The infrastructure damage across 7 cities, including a UNESCO World Heritage Church in Lviv that was set on fire, a maternity hospital in Ivano-Frankivsk, and apartment blocks in Dnipro, will cost Ukraine hundreds of millions to repair. That exchange ratio is not sustainable on Ukraine's side. It was designed not to be. If you're watching this and realizing that the coverage you saw today showed you the fires, named the cities, and moved on without calculating the production mathematics behind what just happened, subscribe to this channel right now. Because the 400 drone headline and the factory that makes 400 drones every 24 hours are two different stories. One is news, the other is strategy. You just got the strategy. Here is what the official statement said on March 24th, and here is what the operational decisions reveal. NATO's official statement: we are monitoring the situation closely. NATO allies have taken appropriate defensive measures. We stand with Ukraine. Poland's operational command confirmed it, placed air defenses on the highest state of readiness, and that Allied air forces had begun operating in Polish airspace. Romania scrambled F-16s as Russian drones attacked areas near the River Danube. The official framing is defensive, measured, and reassuring. Here is what the operational reality shows. Poland scrambling jets and placing air defenses on highest readiness is not a routine procedure. It is the procedure activated when military commanders believe there is a credible risk that weapons will cross into NATO territory. Poland activated that procedure because Russian drones were operating near its border and some contacts were not yet clearly heading away from NATO airspace. Romania scrambled F-16s because Russian drones attacked near the Danube. The Danube forms Romania's border with Ukraine. NATO jets were scrambled because the buffer between the war zone and NATO territory had been reduced to a river. Additionally, the attack struck the Azaxia-Volcanesti power line, disrupting energy supply to Moldova. Moldova is not NATO. Moldova is not Ukraine. Moldova is a third country that lost electricity because a Russian drone struck infrastructure near its border. The blast radius of this offensive extends beyond the two countries at war. The official statement calls this a monitored situation with appropriate measures taken. The operational reality is NATO jets in the air defenses on maximum readiness, and a neutral nation losing power because the war crossed its border in everything but name. The peace talks in Abu Dhabi were scheduled to resume the following day. Russia launched its biggest attack in weeks the night before. This was not a coincidence. It was a signal. Russia's position at any negotiating table is communicated in advance by what it does to civilian infrastructure the night before talks begin. Here are the options Ukraine and its allies face, and why every option involves accepting a form of loss that was not part of the original plan. Option 1, continue current air defense posture and absorb the drone campaign while awaiting negotiations. This is the current strategy. Its premise is that Russia will eventually accept a negotiated settlement that preserves Ukrainian sovereignty. The problem is that every week of this posture depletes expensive interceptor missiles, destroys civilian infrastructure, and erodes the civilian morale that sustains Ukraine's political will to fight. Russia is not trying to win on the front line through this campaign. It is trying to make continued resistance feel more expensive than any negotiated outcome. Option 2, strike Russian drone production facilities directly. Ukraine has conducted long-range strikes inside Russia before. The problem is that Russia's Shahed production is not concentrated in one facility. It is distributed across multiple sites, some in regions deep inside Russian territory beyond the effective range of current Ukrainian strike systems. Striking one factory delays production. It does not stop it. And every strike on Russian territory increases Russian political justification for further escalation. Option 3, accelerate interceptor drone production to match Russian output. Ukraine is already producing 1,500 interceptor drones per day and aiming for more. The problem is the scaling target. Russia is moving toward 1,000 attack drones per day. Ukraine would need to produce and deploy 900 interceptors per day just to maintain its 90% success rate against that volume, while also managing cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and glide bombs that the interceptor drones cannot counter. The cheap defense works against cheap offense. It does not protect against the mixed barrage Russia now launches simultaneously. Option 4. Pressure China to stop supplying the electronic components that make Russian Shahed production possible. Western electronics and Chinese parts are both present in recovered Shahed wreckage. Chinese companies are the critical node. Without Chinese components, Russian production cannot scale to 1,000 per day. But China has strategic interest in seeing US and NATO resources exhausted in Ukraine. Every interceptor missile NATO ships to Kyiv is unavailable for Taiwan. Beijing has no incentive to stop the supply chain. Sanctions on Chinese firms have been proposed. They have not been implemented at a scale that meaningfully reduces component flow. Every option is a version of managing a deteriorating situation. Not reversing it, not winning it, managing its pace of decline. And none of them address the core arithmetic. Russia can produce faster than Ukraine can intercept. Until that equation changes, the spring offensive will not be the last one. Let me explain why a drone war in Ukraine is a stress test for every military alliance on Earth. The Shahed drone is not a Russian invention. It is an Iranian invention that Russia licensed, built domestically, and now manufactures at industrial scale. It is the same drone Iran used to strike Gulf state infrastructure, while U.S. Navy ships fired $10 million interceptors to stop $50,000 weapons. The same drone that Ukraine has shot down more than 44,700 times in 4 years of war. The same drone that Ukraine is now selling its expertise to defeat to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait. Ukraine has shot down more Shaheds than anyone on Earth. Its interceptor drone program is the most battle-tested counter-drone capability in existence. And Zelensky is now selling that expertise globally, deploying more than 200 Ukrainian advisors to Gulf states to help them build the same defensive infrastructure Ukraine built under fire. The war in Ukraine created the world's foremost counter-drone expertise, and that expertise is now becoming a Ukrainian export product. But the broader lesson for NATO is more alarming than the commercial opportunity. The alliance's eastern flank, Poland, Romania, the Baltic states, Finland, has watched Russia test the boundary of NATO airspace for 4 years. Russian drones have overflown Romanian territory before. They have been tracked approaching Polish airspace. On March 24th, Poland activated its highest readiness level. This is not standard operating procedure. This is a military command structure acknowledging that the buffer between observation and response has compressed to near zero. The NATO alliance was designed for conventional war. A tank crosses a border. Article 5 applies. A drone crosses a border accidentally while hunting a power grid 20 kilometers away. The legal and military response is ambiguous. Russia has exploited that ambiguity methodically. Every accidental crossing tests the threshold. Every non-response sets a precedent, and every precedent is studied in Beijing, Pyongyang, and Tehran as a data point about what NATO will absorb before it acts. The spring offensive that began on March 24th is not primarily a military operation. It is a negotiating tool, a precedent setter, and a live demonstration of what drone-based attrition warfare looks like at scale. Every nation with a defense ministry is watching. Most are taking notes. Here is what you carry away from tonight. Russia launched 400 drones, 23 cruise missiles, and 7 ballistic missiles at Ukraine on the night of March 24th. 7 cities hit, 4 dead. 27 injured. A 17th century UNESCO World Heritage Church in Lviv set on fire. A maternity hospital damaged. Apartment blocks destroyed in 3 regions. Poland activated its highest air defense readiness. Romania scrambled jets. Moldova lost power. Peace talks in Abu Dhabi were scheduled for the next day. The production math. Russia builds 404 Shahed drones per day and is scaling to 1,000. Ukraine intercepts 90% of what Russia launches and is producing 1,500 interceptors per day. At 1,000 Russian drones per day, Ukraine's interception capacity covers 1/10 of the volume. The other 9/10 penetrate. This is not a spring offensive in the traditional sense. There are no armored columns crossing open ground toward a capital city. There is a factory. And the factory runs 24 hours a day, building the cheapest effective weapon in modern warfare, faster than the defense can absorb it. Share this video because tonight's coverage showed you the fires. It named the cities. It quoted the officials. It did not calculate the 404 drones per day. It did not explain that the scaling target is 1,000. It did not tell you that Poland was on maximum air defense readiness, not routine monitoring. It did not connect the timing to the Abu Dhabi talks, scheduled for the morning after. The story is not 400 drones in one night. The story is the factory that will produce 400 drones again tomorrow night. And the night after that, and every night, until the negotiation produces a settlement or the math produces a collapse. Right now, the math is winning.